am today in my studio to do another little watercolor painting here. We're going to go over techniques of wet into wet as well as dry brush and some of the negative painting techniques that I like to use in my paintings. This painting is up in Cedar Breaks National Monument. A really fun place to go. It's very similar to Bryce Canyon. If you've ever been there, lots of pinnacles and white, pink, orange cliffs that cascade down into a canyon, and you get some really lovely views, and all of it is sort of rimmed by these beautiful pine and evergreen trees that in lots of gnarly shapes because of the wind that's on the rim, that's hitting it constantly on the rim. So anyways, this painting is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to be working from a reference photo that I shot when I was recently up there doing some plein air painting. And it's a scene where I'm up on one canyon rim looking across at another canyon rim, and this is the photograph, the photo reference that I'll be working from. Now, as usual, I've changed a few things on this painting, and or for this painting, and I'm controlling the values a little bit. I'm taking out some things that I'm not interested in. I'm changing some of the shapes quite a bit down in the foreground. Instead of two pine trees right here, I'm going to have some other kind of shrubs down at the bottom, but I do like this nice vertical tree right here, so I'm going to use that. So join me now as I start on this painting. Okay, we're ready to go now. If we'll look at the board that I've got here, I've got my painting sketched out on 140-pound Arches paper. I've got it taped down with artist tape. I've got a little reference photo here as well, especially for the detail on the cliffs and the structure of those, but the rest of it I'm going to just kind of use my own artistic license. I've got my Daniel Smith and Winsor Newton paints out here, and I'm going to begin this painting right now. And usually the first part of my paintings go very, very quickly, the first half hour, so I'm going to get a lot of the values in there, a lot of color, and then after I get those in there, I'll continue to overlay glazes on top of those to make them work. So let's get started here on the sky area first. Now this is just a little thin area of space up here at the top. And so we don't want a whole lot of attention up here because we've got so much happening down in here. So I'll just soak this area, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a little wet into wet wash there using just two colors this time. We're going to first use some of this yellow ochre, and I'm going to stroke this along the bottom edge of this cliff right down here. Go back and forth with that, and that's going to give a little glow on the bottom there. And then I'm going to take a little bit of blue, and in this case I'm going to use some phthalo blue, which is more like a green. It's very, 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 very intense, so you kind of have to be careful with it. But as it comes down and mixes with this, it'll look even more green as I pass down across this area into this bottom, and let these pigments just kind of work their way down. I'll let that begin to settle in, and since our paper is tipped a little bit, this pigment that's up here is going to migrate and it's going to work its way down into this yellow. But we'll see a nice thin little glaze across the top here, and that'll be what we'll have to act as our distance. And then I'm going to come in here with a little bit of a darker blue right at the top. On skies, the blues are always lighter, or the sky is always lighter towards the horizon and darker towards the zenith or up at the top. So I'm going to have a little bit darker blue in here, which will be a combination of that phthalo and ultramarine. And I'm just going to run a few glazes right across the top. Okay, so now it's going to gradually go from a darker blue to a lighter blue, then kind of a greenish and into this yellow. And even though it's a very, very narrow space, that's going to give us the feeling that this sky goes way back in space. So while that's drying, I'm going to keep on moving here and work on some other areas. I'll clean out just a little bit of this blue and get ready to work on some reds. And then I'm going to come in here, really I've got to cover a lot of areas, so I'm using some bigger brushes. This is a number 12 round. I like to use synthetic brushes mostly, but I'm going to mix a combination of colors out here in my mixing wells. And as I keep returning back to those wells, I will be adding different colors each time as I go in there and trying to allow those pigments to mingle. Now this is an orange right here and a cadmium red light. Then I'm going to come over and pick up some of this brilliant orange color down in here, and this is called quinacridone sienna. Beautiful color for the red cliffs of southern Utah. And a little bit of Naples yellow down here, which is much lighter. We got to use it sparingly because it's kind of chalky. And then the last color I'm going to get out here, all reds. This is quinacridone coral, and it's a color that I used for some of my cooler reds and violets and purples. What I'm going to shoot for now is the lightest light pinks and yellows down in this area right here. I'm going to do some very, very thin washes. I'm not going to care about these trees or anything else because this is going to be lighter than what those are. And so I'm just going to cover this whole area and let a variety of colors mix in here. I don't care if it's dark or light or what. I'm just going to get these light tones in here and get some of these pinks that are off in the distance back into here, and very, very loosely work my way across. Now you'll notice that we have some whites and yellows up in here, so I'll kind of preserve those in a minute, and or come back to those in a minute and just preserve those areas right now, and continue to work down here with some of these other beautiful colors, and just let them run and work their way clear down into where these bushes are and where they're going to be. And I'll just go right past them and ignore them because they'll be so dark that we won't even be able to see much of these pinks coming through. We'll paint these darks over the top. So now I've got this variety of color and tone working its way down into here. This will be the very, very light highlights that's showing up right now. Right in this area, I want there to be some especially light areas. So I'm going to take a little bit of paper towel. These are Viva towels, which I like because they're very soft and hold a lot. I'll just kind of fold that down a little bit and then gently lift in this area some of this pigment and keep this very, very light right on these points right here. And I'll let the rest of it just stay like it is, and make sure I've got my lights up there. Now, while this is drying and it's working its way into the pigment, I might do a little bit of splattering, boom, 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 to get some texture down into there. But I'm going to go ahead and bring some values clear down into this area, and I'm going to mix now a little bit of blue into that. Right down in here, I'm going to have some branches show through, and so I want to get a little bit of blue in this area. Okay, now as we come back to this painting, I'm going to start working on building up the values and continuing to work on starting with the distant cliffs back up over in here and then moving forward again, and just begin to continually darken the values, but at the same time I'm going to be watching the color, keeping it a little bit lighter and not so intense back here, and getting more intense and stronger up in this area. So let's come back here into the distance, and I'll mix a little blue up over here, and I'm gonna bring some yellow. Those distant cliffs back here are actually kind of a cream color, and they're off in the distance, so we will have a gray here, but we're going to still work with some reds, but very, very pale. Okay, I'm going to start right back up in here with some of these little shadow areas. And right here, and I'm looking at these little areas right up in here. Don't know if you can see that from where you're at or not, but I think so. Yeah, I'm going to soften this outside edge right here on all of these. We don't have too hard of an edge. And after all, we're quite far back there, so. And then we've got this area right up across the top there where the trees come down and join it. But I'll get just a few of these little shapes back there and see if I can get the right value range. And then I'm going to get a little bit stronger back up in here. I'll put the reds down, then I'm going to come back in with a little blue in there, because that's a shadow area now. But I'm going to let the pigments mingle. So I've got an underlay of red and letting it just mix together by itself. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to keep this very light back in there for now. But if we come along back in here, I see some reds. And I'm going to mix up kind of a creamy red back in here, and then I'm going to maybe combine it with a little touch of blue and come back in here and get this shadow as it comes down this side and works its way back. And I also have some up in here as well, so I think I'll go ahead and get that up in there. And then touch a little bit of this red into it and bring it down into this part. We like to see colors blend a little bit. Yeah, actually quite a lot. And so I'm going to get these in this value range right up in here. I'm going to start to pull those in and darken them up a little bit. I want to see the red. Now you can see that I've put the tree in here on the left, and now I'm just working my way down to the bottom towards the bushes that are there, doing a little bit of negative painting. I'll define a few of these branches down in this area as I go. And kind of get at the base of darks in here, and then I can, once I establish these darkest darks, then I can go back and work up in here and start to build those up together. So I'll just continue to work in here. I'm leaving a place where we're going to have some negative shapes of branches that come out in this area, and I'm going to do those right now before I get any more darks in here. I'm going to shape some of those as they come out from underneath this shape. Okay, and I might come back in and darken those, and likely will, but right now I could just start to get some of these in place, and I'll have them. So the negative painting this can be kind of tedious, but I enjoy it. Some of them, sometimes I'll draw them in where the branches are going to go. Other times I'll just kind of keep an eye on the edges that I make, like right here and here and here, and just kind of build them up as I go and see what direction the branch takes, and find another edge and follow it. But I won't leave all of these this light. They won't all be this little tangle of white leaves. Some will be much, much darker, and some will be different colors as well as I start to build it up. But right now I want to leave these shapes, and then I can darken them up or just leave them very, very light, as the case may be. I'm just watching these edges now and watching it form. I see that this is coming here, so I'll continue over on this side and let that branch come this way. But I do want to have some branches down in here, so I'm just taking some care right now just to build those in. And it doesn't matter where they are, they just got to be there. I want to make the shapes interesting, so I'll just keep watching as I go and see how does that look interesting or not, and keep it going that way. Main thing is I just want to get rid of these whites and these big white passages in here that are light, and start to move them back into a value range that will get closer to what they're going to end up being later. I'm going to cut around a few of these. Allow these yellows to come right down to this edge here, and on this outside perimeter I'm going to go ahead and shape them. Okay, so it's starting to feel like it's coming together. We're getting the basic colors in there, we're getting them put down. We have a sense of foreground, middle ground, and distance. Now we'll just continue to work these shapes and adjust the values as we go. There's a lot more work to do, but all of this part moves along pretty quickly, and then from there on it doesn't move quite so fast, but it still moves along pretty good. Notice that I'm using a little bit smaller brush, and that is because I'm moving into an area as we move up into the foreground where we have a little more detail in the lines and the structure that we're working on here, little smaller shapes. And so I'm just kind of taking that a little more gently, a little more, a little slower approach, I should say, as we come down into these areas. I made me just a little bit bigger print right here to work from as I look at the structure down in here, just to try to be slightly more careful and get some more of the features in on these rocks that we need to smooth things out. Okay, now I'm going to keep these darks coming down into here. It's a little more red into that, and I'm going to get really dark right down in this area. Pick up these deep reds right down into here, very, very dark. And they're going to melt down into this whole patch of foliage down in here. But you notice how we have to get progressively darker as we come forward with these cliffs to make them look natural. And we'll continue to add a few things here and there as we go, and shape, especially these fans as they come down off these cliffs. We'll shape those fairly carefully at a later point, but right now we just want to get the feeling for these in and get a nice, some nice colorations in on this. Well, okay, so we've got our lights here, here, and here, and down in here. And then we've got a nice line that comes here. I might need to lift this right there. I think I will. I'll lift that right now. And then I've got these darker fans that are coming down off of the edge of these cliffs right up in here. And get a few of those stronger details up in here as well as it approaches the foreground. So this is the kind of more tedious part of this painting that we work on now, as we start to kind of build these shapes up using darker darks and work them through. So we'll get going on that. mix up just a little bit of paint here. Now on these branches, I want to leave a little bit of highlight right on that edge, but I want them to be dark enough to read. I just want there to be a slight little highlight over on this side that's facing towards the light. And they won't be all the way up, but I'll evaluate that as we go along. I want these branches to appear to cross over this side. And let's get a little bit of a mixture going down in here and start down here. Darken this up just a little. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Okay, so we can start to see these branches come up through here. Okay, again, I want to leave a highlight down that left side, but I want it to be dark over on this side. And I want there to be some variety. So I'm going to introduce a little bit of red. And leave those lights, but come on up this trunk here. A little bit here, up through there, and I won't go much up into this sky area, but I'm going to leave that lighter. Okay, now I'll come across this area and bring this branch out. So I've got some lights that I regained by lifting just slightly with a wet brush and a soft edge, and I'll bring some of these branches up, and then I'm going to let these pigments mingle. That's the way we make this look natural and real, is to let these pigments mingle, wet into wet, even if we're working in a small area as this is, and rough up some of these edges slightly. And I'm working on a little bit up in this area, warming it up on the side towards the light that's coming over here, and warming up this area down in here. And I'll just continue to work on this as we go. And this is the part of the painting that it kind of consumes a little time as we come down into here and start to address some of these areas where we have the darks, but we don't want them to be just dark like this is up here. We want it to have a little bit of color to it. So I'm just bringing that as we work along up at the top, and then there's going to be some areas of this. I'll use a little bit of phthalo blue and ultramarine blue. Get a nice dark in there along with some of this quinacridone sienna and a touch of sap green. Okay, now those are all very, very, very darks. I'm going to come in here with a little bit finer brush, take some of those darks and cross over this area so we don't just see just a straight value all the way up, that we'll sense that some of these cross that middle plane and come around in front. And I'll try to do that in several places. I'm once again keeping my darker darks to this side because of the relationship with the sun. And I'm also going to leave a few places where there's just a little detail coming out, the sense that there might be a loose branch or something coming out the side of this. I don't want a lot of that because of the kind of evergreen this is, but I want some. And that'll help it feel just a little bit more real. Just to have a few places where a branch or two might break loose and work its way out into this area. So I'll kind of shape a little of that as we go. Again, cross these planes with some good darks, and underneath each one of these would be some darks. And down into here, and on this side. Good darks back over in here. A few more darks down in this area, and then I'll move down here into the foreground and just get a few branches crossing through here. Darken up a few places where these joints are. And that's enough for now. I like how that feels. This doesn't look so solitary anymore, that we have some branches coming out of there. And I'll come down here and probably have a few come out the bottom of this area as well. But for now, something that I like to do frequently is when I come to work down in areas like this, sometimes I'll notice that down in here, as you come into this area right here, there's a light area, there's kind of an orange area, there's a shape here, some shapes there, a line here, that's just already in there. That's from roughing up that surface as we started painting and just dropping a lot of different pigment in there. That's how we benefit from it. But we're going to shape some of that into some of these kinds of shapes here. I'm going to come down into here, and you see these different little colored areas here. I'm just going to take a pencil, it's just a regular old B pencil, and I'm going to kind of draw in some shapes down here that's going to be my guide. And I'm looking for areas. See this area that's kind of red here, this area that's kind of light. I'm going to come in here now with darks and build some of those up a little bit. You'll see the shapes start to form. Now, I'll look at what's there, and if it's a greenish area, I'll do a greenish dark down into here. But watch how these edges start to form, and you'll see the shapes of some leaves work their way down through here. A little bit of negative painting right in here to form a branch or two. And again, that just gives us a little feeling of detail that's coming up in there. And another little branch comes out right down in here. This one comes out the top. Bring in some good darks right here. And now what's happening is we're starting, as we bring these darks up in here, against this edge, these are forming a new shape right in here, a new positive shape with these edges that we're making. And down in here, we're going to see some leaves hanging out in this area. And with a few harder edges, we really start to build a sense of that the foliage is overlapping one another. Now I'll make a little branch out of this because it's already there. Come in here with some darks, and then on the other side of this, I'm going to make a few of these leaves and actually shape a couple of them here and there. And I'm using the shapes that I'm already seeing here. And from our earlier time when we put in all of this color here in some very bold strokes, now we're just shaping some of that. I'm going to break down into here right in this area, do a few more negative shapes that will appear as if maybe there's some leaves or spaces where this dark comes behind and these light leaves stick out in front of. Okay, soften that. Grab some of this quinacridone red again, or sienna. Now I'll come down in here where it's starting to be red, and I'll do some shapes down in here. You can see these little branches and leaves start to form right in here. This is just your regular old, good old-fashioned negative painting. Trying to create a sense of texture down in this shrubbery, as well as a sense of overlapping shapes as they go back. So we have a much more interesting area here than what we had before. I'm going to grab some greens along the bottom, earthy greens but dark, and come down in this area, and I'm going to let some of these leaves and these leaf shapes come off the bottom here, and so it'll appear as if these leaves are hanging down out and over the front. And a lot of times you can draw these in, but I don't know, for me most of the time I just watch and see what's there and form a new shape here and there as we go around, and just watch as I go and build it up. Let's bring this on over. And I'm just going to let this bleed off the bottom now. So what we end up seeing is not this dark shape, but we see this light shape that hangs out over the top. And keep going with that. Bring it down, clear to the bottom, and let that just bleed down. Okay, now so instead of seeing this dark, we see this light shape that's coming out towards us. We just have to keep paying attention to that as we go. I'm going to come up here into this area with a little more red. It'll kind of bleed out into this top part, and shape some more down in here. And I'm going to shape this side of a light bush that's coming out this way. Let that bleed up into there. And then I'll be careful right down along this edge. And let that bleed down into that area. So now we're starting to see these shapes form. And, you know, this could go on for a long time, and probably will the way I do it, but we don't need to just you know, keep on working every little detail. We want some hard edges and some soft edges, and we want to build that up as we go. But the place we want this kind of detail is up here in the foreground. That's where we want to see it. I'm going to bring some phthalo over here and pick up a little more pigment, a little of this. I'm going to get real dark as we come up against this foreground here. Real dark. I want to make sure I've got the dark to be able to create that and create these shapes. Anything that's light I'm going to leave, obviously, for now, but I might come in and darken that up in just a little bit. In fact, I will for sure, but right now I can just kind of keep plugging along and let these darks run back behind. And I want them to be every bit as dark as this is back here. But notice how I'm making a few places here where we can see the forms of these leaves over the top. Now you can see how this dark area down in here starts to pull this forward, and now it feels more like we're looking through the trees back at this view. And this area that's pretty strong back here, it doesn't seem so dominant once we bring these darks into the foreground. It starts to look a little more natural. Okay, I like how that's turning out there. Some more of these reds down in here will help to work that into it a little bit. Okay, I'll just bring the rest of these greens down here and have it touch the bottom. We want these shapes to link. We want it to touch the edge here and touch the edge here and touch the edge over here. So I'm going to go ahead and darken these up. And I'm preserving these light areas, but I'm going to go ahead and make them a little darker in just a minute. So, but I want to get these darks where I want them first. Okay, and I'm going to darken up down here. And then let it go a little lighter. Just use more of a sap green down in here and let that blend from really dark to dark, but not that dark. And now it looks more like we're looking through the trees and working back into the scene that we have here. So I like that. I like how that's coming. Now as we work our way closer up to the top here, then we're going to, as we work our way up into here, we'll have some darks up in here as well, but they're going to be much warmer. So I'm going to do the same thing here as I did here in building these shapes and patterns of light and dark. I'm going to come down right into here. The light is coming from this side, but we want to make it still be dark underneath, because if there's a big clump of leaves here and the light's hitting on them, that means back underneath here it's going to be quite dark, like this. So I'm going to leave a few places where there's definitely some leaf shapes right on this perimeter, and a place where there's some branches that come up underneath these leaves that come out over the top. So I've got my leaf shapes that are coming down in here, and all this area in here is going to be dark. And then these leaves come out and they're going to be very, very light, as they are right now. Maybe a few little places where they can overlap slightly, but let's let our darks now fold up and start to go underneath there. And again, I'm using a smaller brush so that I can control where I'm headed with this. And let's see, I'll bring in a little touch of red into it, up underneath, right in here. Okay, now I'm going to come underneath this little panel or clump of leaves that come out there, and come in along the bottom and let these shapes come out towards us. Okay, so see how this little area is working right there? And now you can see these leaves that I have coming out forward. I'll do the same thing up in here, and I'm going to do the same thing in here, but I'm going to let those just kind of blend down into this yellow area by bringing this clear water, so that it won't be as dark as it is over here, but we'll still see these leaves hang out over the top there. Good, that looks good. All right, up in here, I'll shape a few Okay, so we're getting lighter as we rise up into the light. We still need a few more darks down in here. I'm going to use some more of the quinacridone, put a little dark into it right here, and come back and form some edges right in here, and then touch a little bit of dark underneath here, just to make that have a little more power in it. Okay, and then I'll shape these little trunks and branches underneath here that are supporting these leaves. And do that with this darker color. Sometimes when I get to concentrating and I start talking quieter and quieter, it sounds like I'm the commentator on the US Open. I'm just getting ready to make a stroke in here, and oh, look at that, it just rolled so close to the hole. And I start getting quieter and quieter. So, and look at how this panel now comes out forward. Look at how this panel comes out forward. I'm just going to do a little bit of darks right up underneath, because it's going to get darker and darker right up under there, and it's going to make these leaves feel like they come out even closer to us. Okay, now that's feeling pretty good. I like it. Now let me come down here where there's some of these darks, and I'll blend those up together. Let me take a little bit of sap green right in this area, right up to that branch, and let that go through the branch up into here, and then get darker as we come down into this shape. And see how important this negative painting is to watercolor, but how effective it is as well. Because these are shapes that we see in nature, and this little tangle of branches down here is going to be so important. Now I'm going to bring some really dark darks up in here so that this dark kind of folds into here, and you're just kind of looking through that. But right now I'm going to mess a little bit more up in this area and just try to create a little more texture up in here with a little more detail than what we've got. So with this negative painting, it's always just a matter of you're painting the dark, but you can't get lost in that dark. Because what's happening is the darks are the only purpose of those darks is to reveal these light shapes. And so we can't get trapped into the idea that we're painting darks. We're not. We're painting lights. And we see that as we put these down, and it forms these little light and dark shapes in there that are so nice. And in nature, our eye's going to find those lights a lot quicker than we're going to find these dark shapes. But the whole thing comes together when we start balancing hard edges and soft edges. And like we'll soften this out right now and let that just bleed back into there. and these hard edges right there that tell the story. We don't want them everywhere, but in a few key places, we want those edges to really break out. I sometimes wonder if you viewers at home that see this, or in your studio, or right now you're like going snore, snore, and you're dozing back and forth and back and forth, and when will he be done? Well, it really hasn't taken that long, but it does get kind of tedious. But if I didn't show you this, then I'd get calls saying, hey, why didn't you show us how to do that? I waited the whole time just to see how to do that negative painting. So I've kind of got to do it, leave it in here. But if you need to fast forward or something, I won't be offended. But for me, yeah, this is the fun part that I really like. So you got to watch it. It's negative painting. It's kind of my trademark, and so many people ask me about it and say, you know, how do you approach it? And do you draw in every little leaf and every little shape and every little stick? And the answer to that is no, of course not. But if you need to, there's nothing wrong with that. I usually just look at the shape that's there and try to balance it. It's just like doing an abstract painting or a non-objective painting. You're just looking at it and watching the edges and saying, well, what does it need over here? And what does it need over there? A few darks in this area, needs some more reds over here, it needs some more yellows over there. And just the same as you would if you were working on a non-objective painting and just exploring the deliciousness of the colors. And so in realistic painting, you want to do the same thing, only you want to make it look like it does in nature too. Can bring in some reds down in here. Because I want to keep this, I want to have it dark, but I want to have these lights coming up towards the top. So I like how this is shaping up. I'm going to try to move a little quicker here so we can wrap this up shortly. So I'll just get a few more of these darks in here and then bring this down. I have a little bit of the quinacridone, this quinacridone red, and this is kind of a brownish area. So I'm going to bring some of that down into here just to kind of warm it up slightly, and we'll see how it goes right down in here. Okay, and now I'm just going to let that fade out. And then in a couple of places, I'm going to let it cross over the branches. So we'll start to see some red branches as well as the lighter yellow branches, and then I'll come back in and actually make some of these branches into a blue shape as well. But while I've got this red on my brush, I'll look for a few places where I want to alter that. Push it back just a little bit, not too much. I think up in this area is another place where it might be nice to have some of those red branches coming up through there. Okay, now we're starting to get to a good point. So I feel like my darks are dark enough down in here now. I've got more to do, which I will do, but I'm looking up in this area and I'm wondering, maybe I need some darks like this right up in here, or at least see some of those spots show through where we have the red back behind. So maybe I'll grab a little bit of this and a little bit of the quinacridone coral as well, and come come up in here and allow some places maybe where this is going to show through those cliffs behind. And I think I'll do it right there. I'm picking areas where I've already got some lights. Okay, now we've got some of those nice reds showing through there. And while I'm at it, I'll just get a little bit down here in these areas. Some of the reds showing through the cliffs from behind that show through the holes in the trees. If these were up here, we'd call them sky holes, but they're just places in the foliage where you can see through and see the cliff behind. So we want to get some of that in here. Okay, now right up in here, as I mentioned a minute ago, I need some darks. So I'm going to grab some. And I'm going to bring some of this phthalo that's over in here, and I'll introduce it into the reds that are there. And then I'm going to have just a touch of the green back in here. So this kind of red that's right in that area, I'm going to bring a little of that up high, right up into here. Again, some of you will probably be saying, well, gosh, he's just diddling with it. And yeah, I probably am, probably too much. But you got to do what you got to do. Yeah, you've got to do what feels right to you as you get up in there. I'm going to let these darks fade down into here and blend out into the lighter areas around it. And try to get just a couple of places in here where I've got some darks that are as dark as down in here to start to tie these areas together. And back here on this side, which is in the shadow side, I'm going to bring a lot more darks up in here. Bit of detail on some of these branches that are going to be showing through, like these are on that side. That'll help bring the two sides forward. Okay, nice. Okay, I feel pretty good about that. Okay, now I'm going to bring some darks down in this area and fill out this foliage here. I'll touch up a little bit in the foreground here, and I'll be close to being done. So let me get these really dark darks right up in here. And now we're going to see, as we see some leaf shapes in here, I'm going to see some of that over in here as well. Across this bottom, I'm going to have, I've got some branches up here that are sticking out. Well, I would have even bigger branches towards the bottom of this trunk. So I'm going to work some darks in here. A little more. And it's going to be quite dark right up in here on this side, and along the bottom there's not going to be too much color down in here. Shape some of these lighter leaves in the foreground. Okay, and now I'm going to bring just a little bit of these darks across here in the foreground, so we feel like we're looking through a little tangle of shrubs that are crossing their way here, and we've got some branches that stick out on both sides as they come down through here. Okay, so I think this is coming along nicely. Feel pretty good about it. I've just got to, I'm going to subdue some of these real light lights and push some of those quite far back in there, and work on just a little bit more in this foreground area. Then I'll go back into here and maybe finish a little bit, maybe darken up some of this area back up in here. So I'll just continue to work on that. I think I'll clean my palette right now. I'll leave these darks that are right here in the foreground. Let's just take a towel like this and clean out the palette and kind of start fresh every once in a while. What I'm going to do right now is I want to get some blues, starting with my ultramarine. And where these branches go back up underneath the shrubs, I want that to be quite dark and quite blue. And as they start to work their way out towards the light, then they get lighter and lighter. But up underneath the shrubbery, then they're quite a bit darker. So I'll just mix some blues out in here and make sure I got those dark enough back underneath. And then there's going to be some places where one branch crosses over another, and that means one's going to be lighter than another one's going to be. But the light isn't just hitting consistently on here, it's hit and miss. Okay, it'll be in shadow here from these leaves, the light will come through and hit here. It'll be in shadow back in here, it'll come over and hit there. There'll be a place where shadow crosses over here and there. This branch right down in here is going to go behind this one. And this is how we make it look as if the objects have mass and form. They're just not all the same. Some go back, some come forward, and we keep moving them in that direction. And it really makes these leaves feel like they come out from behind. I'm going to come over and pick up some blue over here as well. Push these back just a little bit. Push that back slightly. And a couple of places up in here, we want to see that blue. Okay, now I've pushed some of those back a little bit and brought some forward. I'll just finish those off. I think I'll make this one behind here a darker blue. And right here where it meets the edge, we'll darken it up as well. And I'll leave this light out there, leave this one light, and I think that's all right. Okay, Yeah, I like how this is coming along. I like what's happening here. So let's go ahead and come up here now and examine some of these areas up in here and see what we need. I'd like to work a little bit on these. I've got this larger print that we were using before. I can kind of bring this up here and lay it across the top and see how I've done on these cliffs. I think really my work needs to be up in there, and see how much more interesting our painting is in this area now than what we've got here. Wow, it's just like this whole thing just comes out towards us, and which is what we want. We want to do something better than what's here in our reference photo. Now what I like to do when I get to this point, and granted there's more to be done, but I like to grab a mat and place the mat over it and say, well, what have I got here? How's it looking? How's this shaping up? And boy, I really like that. I think that is just powerful. There's not much more that I'm going to do on this. If anything, other than put my signature right down here along the bottom and get ready and send that off to the photographer. And once he shoots it, it goes off to the framer, and once it goes off to the framer, it comes back and I send it to a show. This one is going to a show up at Zion National Park honoring the centennial of the national parks. And I'm glad to be a part of that, because the national parks is something that's very special to me. It's something that has helped this nation in so many ways, and by preserving lands which are special, really special lands, that we can all enjoy equally and be able to go into those parks, and either, if we have the capabilities, we can hike or climb. Otherwise, we can enjoy them from our car or from a bench or from a wheelchair. Anyway, we can enjoy those national parks. And the way I like to enjoy it is pack my art stuff with me and go off into a canyon somewhere, or sit by the Virgin River in Zion, and with the autumn leaves, just crisp and beautiful in the early dawn, and oh man, it's spectacular. So I enjoy spending a lot of time up there and doing painting, and I hope to see you out on the trail somewhere. Well, thanks for joining me for this painting today. I'm Roland Lee. Come back again. Thank you.